She was sitting in seat 1A, wearing a hoodie and holding a ticket that cost more than the flight attendant's annual salary. But when Serena Caldwell asked for a glass of pre-flight champagne, the purser didn't just say no. She sneered, handed her a warm bottle of water, and threatened to have her arrested for causing a disturbance. They thought she was a lucky contest winner or a seat filler. They had no idea that 4 hours ago, Serena didn't just buy a ticket. She bought the entire airline, and by the time this plane lands, their careers will be over. The rain lashed against the reinforced glass of JFK's Terminal 4, blurring the runway lights into streaks of neon red and white. Inside the exclusive first-class lounge of Stratford Airways, the atmosphere was a vacuum of hushed wealth. Serena Caldwell sat in a corner wingback chair, nursing a black coffee. She didn't look like the other patrons. To her left, a man in a bespoke Italian suit was shouting into a Bluetooth earpiece about stocks. To her right, a socialite was loudly complaining about the thread count of the napkins. Serena, by contrast, wore a charcoal cashmere hoodie, fitted black joggers, and pristine white sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in a simple, elegant bun, and her face was bare of makeup, revealing glowing, dark skin that seemed to irritate the lounge staff simply by existing in their space. She looked tired. And she was. It wasn't every day you finalized a hostile takeover of a failing legacy airline. As of 8 a.m. that morning, Serena Caldwell, the founder of the tech giant Caldwell Ventures, was the majority shareholder and new CEO of Stratford Airways. The ink was barely dry on the digital contracts. The press release was scheduled to go out tomorrow morning, London time. Currently, not a single soul on the payroll knew that the woman in the hoodie was the one signing their checks. She wanted to experience the product before she fixed it. She wanted to see why Stratford's stock had plummeted 40% in 2 years. "Excuse me," Serena said softly, flagging down a passing lounge attendant named Kevin. "Could I get a refill on the water?" Kevin didn't stop walking. He glanced at her, checked his watch, and muttered, "Buffett is self-service for guests on past travel," before rushing over to the man in the suit to offer him a hot towel. Serena paused, her hand hovering over her empty glass. Guests on past travel. It was industry code for employees flying for free, or friends and family tickets. They assumed she wasn't a paying customer. They assumed she was a charity case. She didn't correct him. She just noted the time and his name. Kevin. 8:45 p.m. 30 minutes later, boarding began for Flight 909 to London. When Serena approached the gate agent, a woman named Patricia with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, took Serena's boarding pass without looking up. The machine beeped a distinct, happy tone. The tone for first class, full fare. Patricia frowned. She looked at the screen, then at Serena, then back at the screen. She tapped her keyboard aggressively. "Is there a problem?" Serena asked, her voice calm, possessing the distinct cadence of someone used to boardrooms, not bar fights. "System error," Patricia mumbled, not making eye contact. "It says seat 1A. That's usually reserved for VIPs." She looked Serena up and down, her eyes lingering on the hoodie. "Are you sure you didn't switch passes with someone?" "My name is on the ticket, Patricia," Serena said, pointing to the mobile screen. Patricia sighed, a heavy, dramatic exhale that signaled she was doing Serena a massive favor. "Fine. Go ahead. But don't block the aisle. We have Diamond status members behind you." Serena walked down the jet bridge, the cool air of the tunnel hitting her face. She tightened her grip on her leather carry-on. She had heard rumors that Stratford Airways had a culture problem, that the staff had become elitist and lazy under the old leadership. But hearing rumors was one thing. Feeling the sharp sting of dismissal was another. She stepped onto the plane, turning left into the first-class cabin. It was a sanctuary of beige leather and walnut wood. There were only 8 suites. Standing at the galley entrance was the purser, the head flight attendant. Her name tag read, Brenda. She was tall, with stiff blonde hair sprayed into a helmet of perfection, and a smile that didn't reach her icy blue eyes. "Boarding pass," Brenda snapped, hand extended, blocking the aisle. Serena showed her phone. Brenda stared at it. She didn't move out of the way. 1A? There must be a mistake. Mr. Sterling usually takes his rest breaks in 1A. "I paid $22,000 for this seat," Serena said, her patience thinning by a fraction. "I doubt Mr. Sterling paid that." Brenda let out a short, incredulous laugh. "There's no need for attitude. I'm just doing my job. We get a lot of upgrades from the back who get confused." She finally stepped aside. But as Serena passed, Brenda leaned in, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Try to keep your carry-on out of the way. These overhead bins are fragile and expensive." Serena placed her bag in the bin with practiced ease, took her seat in 1A, and buckled up. She watched as other passengers boarded. The man from the lounge, the one in the suit, took seat 1B across the aisle. Brenda practically curtsied when he entered. "Mr. Holloway." "So good to see you again," Brenda cooed, taking his coat. "The usual scotch once we're airborne?" "You know it, Brenda," Holloway grinned. Serena watched the interaction. It was a masterclass in service. For him. For her, it was a masterclass in hostility. She pulled out her phone and sent a quick text to her chief operating officer, David. "Prepare the severance packages. I have a feeling we're going to need a lot of them." The plane pushed back from the gate. The safety video played, a pretentious film featuring models walking through Paris rather than actually showing how to buckle a seatbelt. Once they reached cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign pinged off, the cabin crew sprang into action. Or rather, they sprang into action for everyone except seat 1A. Serena had her tray table down. She had opened her laptop, a sleek, custom-built machine that contained the entire financial history of Stratford Airways. She was currently looking at the customer service training budget, which appeared to be effectively zero. Brenda moved through the cabin with a bottle of Dom Perignon wrapped in a white linen napkin. She filled Mr. Holloway's flute. She moved to seat 2A, then 2B. She chatted, she laughed, she offered warm nuts. When she reached row 1 again, she breezed past Serena. "Excuse me," Serena said, raising her hand slightly. Brenda stopped, her back stiff. She turned slowly, her face annoyed. "Yes?" "I'd like a glass of champagne, please," Serena said. Brenda looked at the bottle in her hand, then at Serena. She pursed her lips. "I'm sorry, miss. We have a limited supply of the vintage champagne. I have to prioritize our frequent flyers." The lie was so blatant it was almost impressive. The first-class cabin was half empty. There were 4 open seats. There was plenty of champagne. "I am a paying customer in first class," Serena said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming steelier. "The ticket includes the service. Pour the drink." The cabin went silent. Mr. Holloway across the aisle lowered his newspaper, peering over his reading glasses. Brenda's face flushed a blotchy red. She wasn't used to being challenged, certainly not by someone wearing sneakers. "I don't appreciate your tone. I can bring you a glass of Prosecco from economy if you're really desperate for alcohol. But this bottle is for the premium guests." "Prosecco from economy," Serena repeated. "Are you refusing to serve me the advertised amenities of my ticket based on what, exactly? My hoodie? Or is it something else, Brenda?" Brenda slammed the bottle down on the serving cart with a loud clatter. "You know what? I don't have to take this. You're lucky you even got that seat. I saw the manifest. It was a last-minute booking, probably a system glitch or a stolen credit card. The accusation hung in the air like toxic smoke. "Stolen credit card," Serena said slowly. She closed her laptop. "That is a serious accusation." "Well, you don't fit the profile, do you?" Brenda spat out, abandoning all pretense of professionalism. "People who sit in 1A usually wear suits and have manners. They don't demand booze the second we take off." "I asked for a drink. That is not a demand. It is an order. An order you are failing to fill." "I am cutting you off," Brenda declared, crossing her arms. "No alcohol for you. I'm marking you as a disruptive passenger. One more word, and I get the captain." Serena looked at Brenda. She looked at the name tag. She looked at the terror in the eyes of the junior flight attendant, a young girl named Chloe, who was watching from the galley, clutching a coffee pot. Chloe looked like she wanted to intervene, but was terrified of Brenda. Serena made a mental note. "Chloe. Save Chloe." "Get the captain," Serena said calmly. "In fact, I insist on it." Brenda scoffed. "Careful what you wish for, sweetie. Captain Sterling doesn't like drama." Brenda marched to the cockpit phone, snatching the receiver off the wall. She whispered furiously into it, casting glares back at seat 1A. Mr. Holloway leaned across the aisle. "Hey," he whispered, loud enough for Serena to hear. "Just let it go. These girls work hard. Don't be a Karen." Serena turned her head slowly to look at him. "A Karen?" "Sir, I just want the service I paid for. If you were denied your scotch because the flight attendant didn't like your tie, you'd have fired someone by now." Holloway grumbled and went back to his paper, muttering something about affirmative action. Serena took a deep breath. She wasn't angry anymore. Anger was hot and messy. She was cold. She was calculating. She was in CEO mode. The cockpit door opened. Captain Richard Sterling emerged. He was a large man, broad-shouldered, with silver hair and the arrogant swagger of a pilot who believed he was God's gift to aviation. He adjusted his tie as he walked into the first-class cabin, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Brenda, who was pointing a manicured finger at Serena. Sterling approached seat 1A. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't ask for Serena's side of the story. He loomed over her, using his height to intimidate. "Problem here?" Sterling barked. "She's being abusive, Captain." Brenda lied smoothly, putting a hand on her chest as if she were a fragile flower. "She demanded all the champagne, shouted at me when I told her to wait, and accused me of being a racist. She's disturbing the other VIPs." Sterling looked down at Serena. "Is that true?" "No," Serena said, remaining seated but holding his gaze. "I asked for a glass of champagne. She refused to serve me, implied I used a stolen credit card, and offered me wine from economy. I would like you to instruct your purser to do her job." Sterling let out a frustrated sigh, rubbing his temples. "Look, miss, I don't know how you got up here, but on my plane, Brenda's word is law in the cabin. If she says you're disruptive, you're disruptive." "I haven't raised my voice once," Serena pointed out. "Check the cameras if this aircraft is equipped, or ask the other passengers." "I don't have time for an investigation," Sterling snapped. "I have a plane to fly. Here is how this is going to work. You are going to sit there, be quiet, and drink whatever Brenda gives you. If I hear one more peep, one more complaint, I will divert this plane to Gander. I will have the RCMP drag you off, and I will personally see to it that you are banned from every airline in the SkyTeam Alliance. Do you understand me?" It was a threat of nuclear proportions. Diverting a transatlantic flight cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. He was bluffing, or he was unhinged. "You would divert a flight because a passenger asked for a drink?" Serena asked, arching a brow. I would divert a flight to maintain the safety and order of my crew, Sterling said, puffing out his chest. Now, water or handcuffs. Your choice. He turned to Brenda. If she speaks again, call the cockpit. Brenda smirked, a vile, triumphant twisting of her lips. Yes, Captain. Sterling turned on his heel and marched back to the cockpit, slamming the door. The cabin was silent. Even Mr. Holloway looked uncomfortable now. The aggression was palpable. Brenda walked over to the galley, grabbed a plastic cup, the kind used for rinsing mouths in the lavatory, filled it with tap water, and slammed it onto Serena's tray table. Water sloshed onto Serena's laptop. Oops, Brenda said. Deadpan. Turbulence. Serena grabbed a napkin and dabbed the water off her trackpad. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, but her face remained a mask of stone. She picked up her phone. She connected to the onboard Wi-Fi. It was slow, expensive, and spotty, another thing she intended to fix. She opened an encrypted messaging app. She typed a message to David, her COO, and copied the chairman of the board of directors. Code read: I am on flight 909. Captain Sterling and Purser Brenda just threatened to divert the plane to arrest me for requesting service. The pilot is unstable. The purser is discriminatory. I am initiating the protocol immediately. Contact Heathrow Ground Control. When we land, I want the airport police, but not for me. And get the legal team on a conference line, now. She hit send. She sat back, took a sip of the warm tap water, and stared at the back of the seat in front of her. They wanted quiet. She would give them quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before a tsunami. 10 minutes later, the plane didn't divert. But something else happened. The in-flight entertainment screens flickered, the lighting in the cabin shifted, and the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, but this time he didn't sound arrogant. He sounded confused. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Sterling. We've just received a priority message from corporate headquarters via satellite uplink. They are requesting an immediate status check on a specific passenger. Brenda froze in the aisle, a bottle of wine in her hand. They are asking for verification of the safety of Ms. Serena Caldwell in seat 1A. Every head in first class turned to look at the woman in the hoodie. Brenda's face went pale. She looked at Serena. Serena didn't look up. She just kept typing. The silence that fell over the first-class cabin of Flight 909 was heavier than the aircraft itself. The low hum of the Rolls-Royce engines seemed to fade away, replaced by the collective holding of breath. Captain Sterling's announcement hung in the air. Verification of the safety of Ms. Serena Caldwell in seat 1A. Brenda stood frozen in the aisle. The bottle of cheap red wine she had been holding slipped from her numb fingers, tumbling onto the plush navy carpet. It didn't break, but the thud was startlingly loud in the quiet cabin. Red liquid glugged out, staining the rug near Mr. Holloway's expensive loafers. Holloway, the man who, minutes ago, had called Serena a Karen, suddenly looked as though he wanted to crawl into the overhead bin. He pulled his legs back rapidly from the spreading wine stain, casting nervous, sidelong glances at the woman in the hoodie across the aisle. Serena didn't move. She didn't look up from her laptop screen. The soft blue light illuminated her face, emphasizing the hard set of her jaw. She took another sip of the water from the plastic cup. Brenda scrambled. It was a pathetic sight. The icy demeanor shattered, replaced by frantic, messy panic. She grabbed a handful of linen napkins, the high-thread count ones, and dropped to her knees, dabbing at the wine stain, her hands shaking visibly. While on her knees, she looked up at Serena, her eyes wide and rimmed with sudden, terrifying realization. Miss Caldwell? Brenda's voice trembled. It was an octave higher than before. Serena finally slowly turned her head. She looked down at the woman kneeling on the floor. "Yes, Brenda. I had no idea," Brenda stammered, wiping furiously at the carpet. "The manifest. It just said Caldwell. It didn't have any VIP flags. Usually there's a flag, a diamond icon, something." "Does the lack of a digital icon justify treating a passenger with contempt?" Serena asked. Her voice was quiet, level, and terrifyingly calm. "Does it justify fabricating accusations of theft? Does it justify threatening federal arrest because I asked for the beverage listed on the menu?" Brenda swallowed hard. "No, of course not. It's been a long month. We're understaffed. I made a mistake in judgment. Please let me get you that champagne now, the Dom Perignon. I have a chilled bottle right here." Brenda scrambled up, abandoning the wine stain, and rushed to the galley cart. She grabbed the cold green bottle with trembling hands. "Don't bother," Serena said, turning back to her laptop. Brenda froze. "I insist, Miss Caldwell. Please, let me make it right." "I said, don't bother," Serena repeated, typing something. "You've already marked me as disruptive in the system. You've already threatened to divert the flight. Serving alcohol to a passenger you deemed a security risk 5 minutes ago would be a severe violation of FAA regulations. You'd be firing yourself." Brenda turned the color of ash. She realized the trap she had set for herself. Up in the cockpit, the atmosphere was even worse. Captain Richard Sterling was sweating through his uniform shirt. The satellite phone receiver was pressed to his ear. On the other end wasn't just dispatch. It was a three-way conference call that included the VP of Flight Operations and the Stratford Airways General Counsel, a lawyer known as the Viper. "Captain Sterling," the Viper's voice crackled over the uplink, sharp as broken glass. "Explain to me why I just received a priority communique from Serena Caldwell's personal legal team indicating that she is being held under duress on your aircraft, under threat of false arrest." Sterling blustered. "Duress? No. My purser, Brenda. She reported a disruptive passenger in 1A. Standard protocol. I went back to de-escalate." "Did you de-escalate, Richard?" The VP of Flight Operations cut in. "Or did you threaten to divert a London-bound flight because someone asked for a drink? Do you have any idea who is sitting in that seat?" "Some tech executive, I gather now," Sterling mumbled, wiping his forehead. "But that doesn't give her the right to abuse my crew." There was a silence on the line that was louder than shouting. "Richard," the Viper said slowly, "Serena Caldwell isn't just some tech executive. As of 8 a.m. this morning, her holding company bought 51% of Stratford Airways. She owns the plane you are flying. She owns the uniform you are wearing. She is your new CEO." Sterling felt his stomach drop out of his body, somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean. He looked at the instrument panel, fighting a wave of nausea. He had just threatened to arrest his boss. "Oh my God," Sterling whispered. "Listen to me very carefully, Captain," the Viper continued. "Your career is currently hanging by a thread thinner than a human hair. You are going to ensure that for the remainder of this flight, Ms. Caldwell is treated like visiting royalty. If she wants to fly the plane, you let her have the yoke. Do you understand? Fix this. Now." The line went dead. Sterling stared at the receiver. He looked at his co-pilot, a younger man who was desperately pretending to be fascinated by the weather radar. "You knew, didn't you?" Sterling accused the co-pilot. "I saw the news alert on my phone right before pushback, Captain," the co-pilot admitted quietly. "I tried to tell you, but you were yelling about the fuel load." Sterling closed his eyes. He had to go back out there. He had to face the woman in the hoodie. Back in the cabin, Serena received another message on her secure app. It was from David. "Legal has made contact with the cockpit. The captain has been informed of the new ownership structure. They are collectively wetting themselves. Ground reception at Heathrow is arranged. Local police and our private security team will meet the gate. Enjoy the show, boss. Serena allowed herself a microscopic smile. She looked up. Brenda was hovering near the galley, looking like a kicked puppy, terrified to approach, but terrified to stay away. "Brenda," Serena said. It wasn't a shout, but it cut through the cabin noise. Brenda jumped. "Yes, Miss Caldwell? Come here." Brenda approached slowly, wringing her hands. "Since I am banned from the champagne," Serena said, "I would like the full meal service. Now. And I want the young woman, Chloe, to serve it." Brenda blinked. "Chloe? But she's junior. She's not trained for first-class lead service. I should do it to ensure—" "Did I stutter, Brenda?" Serena looked deep into the purser's eyes. "I want Chloe. You will stay in the galley. You will not speak to me or any other passenger for the remainder of this flight unless it is an emergency evacuation. Is that clear?" It was a humiliating demotion in front of the entire cabin. Brenda's jaw tightened, tears pricking her eyes. This was her domain. She was being stripped of power mid-air. "Is that clear?" Serena repeated. "Yes, Miss Caldwell," Brenda whispered, defeated. She turned and walked stiffly to the galley, disappearing behind the curtain. A moment later, Chloe appeared. The young flight attendant looked terrified, her hands shaking slightly as she held a linen tablecloth. She had clearly been briefed by a hysterical Brenda. Miss Caldwell," Chloe stammered. "May I lay your table?" Serena closed her laptop and smiled warmly. It was a genuine smile, completely different from the frigid mask she had worn for Brenda. "Please, Chloe, call me Serena. And yes, thank you. I'm starving." The remaining 3 hours of Flight 909 were a surreal study in polarized atmospheres. In the aisle of first class, the air was thick with tension you could cut with a knife. Brenda remained exiled in the galley behind the thick velvet curtain. Occasionally, the sound of aggressive chopping or dropped cutlery would emanate from behind the fabric, signaling her meltdown. But at seat 1A, it was a different world. Chloe, the junior flight attendant, was nervous at first. She overpoured the sparkling water. Her hand trembled when she placed the silverware, but Serena's patience was infinite. "It's okay, Chloe," Serena said gently when Chloe fumbled with the bread basket. "Take a deep breath. You're doing fine." Serena engaged the young woman. Between courses of lobster thermidor and a surprisingly decent truffle risotto, Serena learned that Chloe was 24, working 2 jobs to pay off student loans, and sent money home to her mother in Ohio every month. She learned that Chloe loved the job, but hated the mean girl politics that Brenda fostered among the crew. "She writes us up for everything," Chloe confessed in a hushed whisper while clearing the salad plate. "If our lipstick is the wrong shade of red, if we don't smile enough at the Diamond members. She told me last week I'd never make purser because I don't have the killer instinct." Serena listened intently, her dark eyes thoughtful. Killer instinct is overrated, Chloe. Competence and empathy are far more valuable assets in a service industry. Remember that. Chloe looked at Serena like she was fairy godmother in a hoodie. "Thank you, Serena." Across the aisle, Mr. Holloway was having a miserable flight. He had received his scotch, brought by a subdued Chloe, but he couldn't enjoy it. He kept glancing at Serena, then down at his phone, frantically Googling. He finally found it. A business news article from an hour ago. Caldwell Ventures acquires Stratford Airways in shocking hostile takeover. Serena Caldwell, named new CEO. Holloway turned pale. He remembered calling her a Karen. He remembered telling her to let it go. He realized the woman he had dismissed as an affirmative action, nuisance, held the fate of the airline he flew weakly in her hands. He suddenly felt the urge to apologize, to grovel, but the invisible barrier Serena had erected around her seat was impenetrable. Then the cockpit door opened. Captain Sterling emerged. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 3 hours. His uniform shirt was wrinkled, and his swagger was entirely gone. He walked into the cabin with the gait of a man approaching the gallows. He stopped at Seat 1A. He didn't loom this time. He stood at attention, almost deferential. "Ms. Caldwell," Sterling said, his voice raspy. Serena was eating a spoonful of chocolate mousse. She finished it slowly, dabbed her mouth with the linen napkin, and then looked up. "Captain Sterling, how is the flight path? Still considering a diversion to Gander for my arrest?" Sterling winced visibly. "Miss Caldwell, I have been informed of your position. I want to offer my sincerest apologies for the misunderstanding earlier. I was operating on incomplete information provided by my purser." Serena let out a short, dry laugh. "Throwing your subordinate under the bus already, Captain? That's not very leadership-oriented of you. You were the one who threatened me with handcuffs without asking a single investigation question. You told me your purser's word was law." "I was mistaken," Sterling mumbled, his ears burning red. "I hope you can overlook this incident as we move forward." "Oh, I won't be overlooking it, Richard," Serena said, using his first name deliberately to diminish his authority. "And we won't be moving forward. Not together." Sterling looked sick. I don't understand." "You will. In about an hour when we land." Serena picked up her spoon again. "Now, if you'll excuse me, Chloe has provided an excellent dessert, and I'd like to finish it in peace. Return to the flight deck. Fly the plane. It's the only part of your job you seem capable of doing today." Sterling opened his mouth, closed it, and then turned on his heel. He retreated to the cockpit, a broken man. The cabin remained silent for the rest of the flight. The only sounds were the clinking of Serena's spoon and the muffled sniffling of Brenda from behind the galley curtain. As the plane began its initial descent toward London Heathrow, the cabin lights changed from soft yellow to a calming blue. Brenda emerged from the galley to perform the pre-landing safety checks. Her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy from crying. Her perfect helmet of blonde hair was slightly askew. She reached seat 1A. She had to collect Serena's empty water glass. Brenda's hand shook so violently as she reached for the glass that she almost knocked it over. Serena placed her hand gently over the glass, stopping Brenda. "Leave it," Serena said softly. Brenda looked at her, terrified confusion in her eyes. "But regulations, Miss Caldwell. All service items must be collected." "I own the regulations, Brenda," Serena said. "Leave the glass and sit down in the jump seat. You look like you're going to faint, and I don't want the paperwork." Brenda retreated to the crew jump seat near the door, buckling herself in, looking small and defeated. Chloe took the jump seat opposite her, looking calm and composed. The contrast between the old guard and the potential new guard was striking. The landing gear deployed with a loud thunk. The plane descended through the thick London clouds. Serena looked out the window at the sprawling city lights below. She felt a profound sense of calm. The anger had evaporated, replaced by cold, hard purpose. She picked up her phone one last time before signal loss. She sent a final message to David, on final approach, confirming the welcoming committee is in position at the gate. "I want the handover to be immediate. No delays." David replied instantly with a thumbs-up emoji. The wheels touched the tarmac with a screech of rubber. The plane shuddered and slowed. Reverse thrusters roared. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Sterling's defeated voice came over the intercom. "Welcome to London Heathrow. Local time is 8:15 a.m. Please remain seated until the seatbelt sign is turned off." The plane taxied toward Terminal 5. It didn't go to a regular gate. It taxied toward a remote stand at the far end of the terminal. Looking out the window, Serena saw it. Dozens of vehicles were waiting on the tarmac. Not just baggage carts. There were 3 black SUVs with tinted windows, 2 London Metropolitan Police cars with lights flashing blue, though silent, and a sleek black Mercedes sedan meant for her. There was also a camera crew, their lenses pointed squarely at the aircraft door. Brenda, peering from her jump seat window, saw the police lights. A fresh wave of terror washed over her face. She thought Sterling had actually called them on Serena. She didn't realize the police weren't there to arrest a passenger. They were there to facilitate a corporate execution. The plane came to a stop. The seatbelt sign pinged off. Nobody moved. The tension was too high. Brenda unbuckled, her movements jerky. She moved toward the main cabin door to disarm the slide. "Wait," Serena said, standing up. She pulled on her hoodie, smoothing it down. She picked up her leather carry-on. She walked to the front of the cabin, standing between the galley and the cockpit door. She turned to face the passengers and the crew. "Before we deplane," Serena announced, her voice clear and authoritative, filling the space without shouting. "I have a brief announcement." Captain Sterling opened the cockpit door and stood in the doorway, looking haggard. Brenda stood by the exit, trembling. Serena looked at Brenda. "Brenda, you were right about one thing today. You said people in seat 1A usually wear suits. You're right, they usually do." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "But the person who owns the airline can wear whatever the hell she wants." The great hall was suffocatingly silent. Every member of the council, the visiting alphas, and the pack members who had squeezed inside held their breath. In the center of the room stood Tanya, her face twisted in a mix of triumph and desperation. Beside her, Winter stood small but resolute, her hand firmly gripped by King Kale. "She is a curse!" Tanya shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at Winter. "A wolf without a scent is a wolf without a soul. She has bewitched the king with dark magic. That is the only reason he would choose a runt over a high-born beta like me." Kyle's growl vibrated through the stone floor, causing the windows to rattle. His eyes flashed a deadly crimson. "One more word against my mate, Tanya, and your status won't save you." "Let her speak, Kale," Winter said softly. Her voice, though quiet, carried a strange melodic power that reached every corner of the room. She stepped forward, releasing Kale's hand. "She wants proof? Let us give it to her." The High Priestess, an ancient woman draped in silver robes, stepped forward holding the moonstone, a gem that glowed only for those blessed by the goddess. "If the girl is truly the king's fated mate," the priestess rasped, "the stone will sing. If she is a curse, it will turn black." Tanya smirked, crossing her arms. She had spent years bullying Winter, convinced the girl was nothing. She expected the stone to remain dull, proving Winter was wolfless and unworthy. Winter placed her pale hand on the rough surface of the moonstone. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Tanya let out a cruel laugh. "See? Nothing. She is crack." The sound wasn't the stone breaking, but the air itself splitting. A blinding beam of pure white light erupted from the stone, shooting straight up into the vaulted ceiling. The light didn't just glow, it roared. It swirled around Winter, lifting her hair like a halo. Gasps echoed through the hall as the light expanded, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. When the brilliance faded, Winter was gone. In her place stood a wolf of massive size, larger than any female wolf they had ever seen. Her fur was not just white, it was pearlescent, shimmering like diamond dust. Her eyes were pools of liquid gold. The white wolf. The high priestess fell to her knees, trembling. The legend. She is not a curse. She is the blessing. The entire hall dropped to their knees in unison. The sheer power radiating from Winter forced them into submission. Even the visiting alphas bowed their heads. Only Tanya remained standing, frozen in horror. Her face had gone pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The narrative she had built for years, that Winter was weak, useless, and cursed, had just been shattered by the divine truth. Kyle stepped forward, his own wolf close to the surface, swelling with pride. He looked at the trembling Tanya. "You called her a soulless runt," he said, his voice cold as ice. "Now you stand before the White Queen. Bow." Tanya's knees shook. She looked at the majestic white wolf, who stared back with an intensity that stripped Tanya's soul bare. Instead of bowing, Tanya's eyes snapped with madness. She pulled a silver dagger from her boot. "No, it's a trick!" Tanya screamed, lunging not at Winter, but at the high priestess, intending to smash the moonstone. The sound of the collision was sickening, a wet thud of heavy muscle meeting fragile bone that echoed off the vaulted ceiling of the great hall. Time seemed to freeze. One moment, Tanya had been a blur of manicured rage and silver steel, lunging toward the high priestess with murder in her eyes. The next, she was airborne, casually swatted aside like a rag doll by the massive pearlescent beast that now dominated the center of the chamber. Tanya hit the far stone wall with enough force to crack the masonry. She slid to the floor, her dagger clattering uselessly across the flagstones, skidding to a halt at the feet of a terrified council member. Tanya didn't rise. She lay in a heap of velvet and bruised ego, gasping for air, clutching her ribs. A low, vibrating growl filled the room. It wasn't just a sound. It was a physical sensation that rattled the teeth of every wolf present. The white wolf stood over the fallen beta, her lips peeled back to reveal fangs the size of daggers. Her fur, shimmering with that unearthly diamond dust, seemed to generate its own light, casting long, terrifying shadows against the pillars. Her golden eyes were no longer the soft, fearful eyes of the servant girl who scrubbed floors. They were ancient, burning with the wrath of the moon goddess herself. "Do not move," Kyle commanded, his voice cutting through the tension like a whip. But he wasn't speaking to Winter. He was speaking to his guards, who had raised their spears in confusion. "The Queen is judging the traitor." The guards lowered their weapons instantly, bowing their heads. They knew better than to interfere with a furious alpha female protecting her pack's spiritual leader. Slowly, the blinding white light returned, swirling around the massive wolf. The beast's form shrank, bones knitting and reshaping with a fluid grace that defied nature. As the light faded, Winter stood where the wolf had been. She was naked, but she did not cower. She stood tall, her pale skin glowing in the torchlight, her white hair cascading down her back like a waterfall of silk. Before the crowd could even blink, Kyle was there. He moved with the speed of a striking viper, unclasping his heavy fur-lined cloak and draping it over her shoulders. He pulled the edges together at her throat, his large hands trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline of seeing his mate in her true, divine form. "Are you hurt?" Kyle whispered, his voice rough with emotion, scanning her face for any sign of strain. Winter shook her head slowly. She looked down at her hands, flexing her fingers as if seeing them for the first time. The weakness that had plagued her for years, the constant chill, the frailty, was gone. In its place was a humming, vibrant heat. The bond with Kyle was no longer a thin thread. It was a roaring river of power flowing between them. She turned her gaze to Tanya. The fallen beta was trying to push herself up, coughing up blood. Her immaculate dress was torn, her hair a bird's nest of tangles. The arrogant socialite who had ruled the pack's social circles with an iron fist was gone. All that remained was a broken, pathetic creature. It's a trick, Tanya wheezed, her voice wet and jagged. She looked around the room, her eyes darting frantically to the faces of the nobles she had once charmed. Don't you see? She's a witch, a demon. Wolves don't turn white. It's necromancy. The high priestess stepped forward, clutching the moonstone to her chest. Her wrinkled face was wet with tears of reverence. Silence, you fool, the old woman rasped. You speak of demons in the presence of a deity? That was the Caelum lupus, the sky wolf, the rarest shifting form recorded in our history. The last one was seen 400 years ago. The priestess turned to the crowd, raising her voice. The goddess did not just send King Cael a mate. She sent us a savior. And this? She pointed a shaking finger at Tanya. This woman tried to destroy the sacred stone to hide her own inadequacy. Tanya let out a screech of frustration. I did it for the pack. I did it for Cael. She is a servant, a nobody. I have royal blood. I was meant to be queen. Winter took a step forward. The heavy velvet of Cael's cloak dragged on the floor behind her, making her look regal, like an empress walking through the ruins of a conquered city. The hall fell deathly silent. Everyone waited to hear the voice of the White Wolf. You never did anything for the pack, Tanya, Winter said. Her voice was calm, devoid of the stuttering fear she used to have. It carried a resonance that made the alphas in the room subconsciously lower their chins. You did it for your vanity. You tormented me not because I was weak, but because you sensed I was different. You feared what you couldn't control. Winter stopped just feet away from where Tanya lay. You poisoned the minds of the Omegas. You stole food from the rations of the elderly to host your parties. You lied to the council about the border patrols to keep Cael in the castle, just so you could try to seduce him. Do you deny it? Tanya's eyes widened. How do you know that? The wolf knows, Winter said simply, tapping her temple. When I shifted, I smelled the rot on you. I smelled the lies. Cael stepped up beside Winter, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. His expression was a mask of cold, unforgiving granite. He looked at the council members, specifically at an older man with greying hair who was shrinking back into the shadows. Lord Harlan, Cael barked. Tanya's father flinched, stepping forward with trembling legs. Yes. Yes, my king? Your daughter attempted to assassinate the high priestess and assaulted your queen, Cael said, his voice deadly low. What is the penalty for treason in the House of Harlan? Lord Harlan looked at Tanya. His daughter reached out a hand toward him, her eyes pleading. Daddy, please, tell him I'm a good wolf. Lord Harlan's face hardened. He looked at the massive, terrifying king, and then at the glowing, ethereal woman beside him who radiated power he couldn't comprehend. Self-preservation won out. She is no daughter of mine, Harlan spat, turning his head away. The House of Harlan disowns her. She has brought shame upon my bloodline. Tanya let out a broken wail, a sound of pure devastation. The final pillar of her support had just crumbled. Cael turned back to Tanya. You wanted the old laws? You wanted to stick to tradition? Fine. The punishment for high treason is death. Gasps rippled through the room. Tanya screamed, scrambling backward, scraping her heels against the stone. No. Cael, we played together as pups. You can't. Cael raised his hand, silencing her. But, he continued, glancing down at Winter, my mater has a gentle heart. A heart you tried to freeze, but failed. So I will let her decide your fate. All eyes turned to Winter. This was the true test. A weak Luna would let her go. A cruel Luna would kill her. Winter looked down at the woman who had made her life a living hell for a decade. She remembered the cold nights in the cellar. She remembered the insults, the trips, the slaps, the hunger. But she also looked at the moonstone, glowing softly in the priestess's hands. "Death is too easy for you, Tanya," Winter said softly. "If you die, you become a martyr to the fools who believe your lies. You don't deserve the peace of the afterlife." Winter pointed to the heavy oak doors of the great hall. "I exile you," Winter declared, her voice ringing like a bell. "You are stripped of your rank. You are stripped of your family name. You are stripped of your wolf." "No," Tanya whispered, horror dawning on her face. "Not my wolf." "The priestess will bind your wolf," Winter commanded. "You will walk as a human. You will go to the Shadowlands in the north, the frozen wastes where I almost died. You will live there, alone, without the warmth of a pack, without the strength of a shift. You will feel every degree of the cold, just as I did. And you will survive on scraps, just as I did." Winter leaned down, her face inches from Tanya's. "And every time you shiver, you will remember me." It was a sentence worse than death for a werewolf. To be severed from their wolf spirit and cast into isolation was a torture that broke the mind. "Take her," Kyle ordered. 4 guards surged forward, hauling the screaming, sobbing Tanya to her feet. As they dragged her toward the doors, she thrashed and kicked, begging for mercy, begging for her father, begging for Kyle. But the room was stone. No one moved. No one spoke. As the heavy doors slammed shut, cutting off her wails, a heavy silence settled over the hall. Then, slowly, the high priestess knelt. She placed her forehead against the cold stone floor. "Hail, Luna Winter! Hail, the White Queen!" It started as a ripple. Lord Harlan knelt. Then the council. Then the guards. Like a wave crashing through the room, every knee hit the floor. The visiting alphas, proud men who never bowed to anyone but Kyle, lowered their heads in deep respect. Kyle was the only one left standing beside her. He looked at the sea of bowed heads, then turned to Winter. He didn't bow. Kings do not bow. But he did something far more intimate. He took her hand, raised it to his lips, and kissed her knuckles, then pressed her palm against his heart. "My equal," he murmured, loud enough for the room to hear. "My queen." 3 hours later, the celebration was in full swing, but Winter and Kale had escaped the noise. They stood on the highest balcony of the Alpha's stronghold. The night air was biting, typical for the season, but Winter didn't feel it. For the first time in her life, she was entirely, completely warm. Below them in the courtyard, the pack had gathered. Bonfires roared, sending sparks up toward the stars. The wolves were howling, a rhythmic, melodic song of welcome for their new mother. Winter leaned against the stone railing, clutching the velvet cloak tighter around her. Kyle stood behind her, his large arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her flush against his chest. He rested his chin on the top of her head, inhaling her scent. Fresh snow and wildflowers. "You showed them mercy," Kyle murmured into her hair. "More than I would have." "Suffering in silence is a louder lesson than a quick death," Winter replied, leaning back into his warmth. She looked up at the moon, which seemed to shine brighter tonight. "Besides, I don't want to start our reign with blood on the floor. I want to start it with justice." Kyle turned her around in his arms so she was facing him. His eyes were tender, the red crimson softened to a warm mahogany. He reached up and brushed a stray lock of white hair from her face. "I searched for you for 20 years, Kyle admitted, his voice rough. "Every ball, every gathering, every war. I thought the goddess had forgotten me. I never imagined you were right here, sleeping in the ashes of my own kitchen." "I was waiting for you," Winter smiled, tears pricking her eyes. "I just didn't know it." "I promise you, Winter," Kyle vowed, his thumb tracing her lower lip. "No one will ever look down on you again. You are the highest of us all, and I will spend every day of the rest of my life making up for the days you spent in the cold." Winter reached up, cupping his face. "I'm not cold, Kyle. Not anymore." Kyle leaned down, capturing her lips in a kiss that was searing and absolute. It was a promise of protection, a seal of power, and a declaration of love that transcended status. High above them, the clouds parted, bathing the balcony in pure silver light. Far away, in the desolate shadowlands, a lone figure trudged through the snow, shivering violently in the dark. But here, in the Alpha's arms, the White Queen was finally, perfectly home. What a magnificent end to Winter's journey. She went from the cellar to the throne, proving that true nobility isn't about bloodlines. It's about the strength of your spirit. Seeing Tanya stripped of her wolf and sent to the very freezing lands where she forced Winter to suffer was the ultimate hard karma. It's a brutal lesson. Be careful how you treat the people you think are beneath you, because one day you might be bowing to them. If you got chills when the entire room knelt for Winter, smash that like button right now. And here is a question for you. Do you think Tanya will survive the Shadowlands, or will she perish in the cold? Let me know your theories in the comments. Make sure to share this video with a friend who loves a good revenge story, and subscribe to the channel for more werewolf romances. Turn on that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next video.